everyone, it's Ephraim here from Past Point One Comics, and I have a special guest today, Tony Fleecs, the writer, one of the writers and co-creators of Stray Dogs. Tony, thank you so much for being on my channel.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So before we go into your book, and I have a tons of questions, I just hoping if you can tell us a little bit about your career, how you started writing comic books, and first of all, did you read comic books as a child?
Yeah, I read ever since I was about 10 or so, I guess. Yeah, I've always been a huge fan of comics. I wanted to make comics from a very young age. I guess I always either wanted to be an animator or a comic artist, and I went to school for animation, and it was in animation school that I was like, no, this isn't this isn't what I want to do. I want to make comics. So yeah, I've always wanted to make comics. I've always read comics.
So did you start, so you said you were in animation. When did you get into the writing part of comic books?
Well, I went to art school, and I got out of art school, and I was looking for a job as an artist. And I found a job as a graphic designer. Like, I worked at a TV station. I made like the over-the-shoulder graphics, you know, it says like the president and a picture of the president. And I worked there for about 6 years, and I was really itching to make comics, and I wanted to draw comics. And there was a real creative, it was like a super creative time on the internet for like people collaborating and meeting people and making comics together and stuff. But I couldn't find anybody that inspired me enough as a writer that I wanted to spend all the time that it would take to write or to draw a comic with, you know, like it would seem like if I wanted to make a comic, I would have to do something that I didn't care as much about, or like, you know, make myself care about something. And so I just decided, well, like if I'm going to make a comic, I guess I'll just have to make the whole thing. Like I'll write it too. Mm-hmm. And so the first comic I made was an autobiographical comic that was just basically stories about myself that I told, you know, like you're out at the bar and you tell a story of something that happened. And there were like several of these stories that I told like, you know, 10, 15 times that I sort of had down like to a rhythm, you know, like this happens and then this happens and sort of the beats of it. And so it was pretty easy to take those stories and translate them to like a comic book script. And I drew that, and that got published by a small press publisher in like 2006. And from there, I just started getting, like slowly started getting work drawing comics. And mostly what I've done in comics has been art. So I've written a few things, but mostly I've drawn.
Nice. So can you talk a little bit also about your company, Fleecs Designs? I read in the comic book, or I read online, sorry, that you clients of Disney, 20th Century, Fox, and some baseball teams too, which I thought was very interesting. How'd you get into that?
Well, that's just sort of like being a freelance artist, you know, like you end up working for one client and then they recommend you to another client. So Fleecs Design is my company. It's incorporated, but it's not like I don't have like a building or employees necessarily. I have like freelancers that I'll hire out sometimes, but like everybody who draws or makes stuff has like a loan out, like a business name. And so that's mine. So all these places are just people that I've done storyboards for or illustrations for or logos or just sort of gigs that I've gotten along the way just by being out there working, you know.
Yeah, nice. Very interesting. I think it's the way you've, you know, like I said, when I read it, I'm a big sports fan, and then I go, oh, wow, you know, Milwaukee Brewers and who else? The Bengals. I was like, that's pretty cool. So
yeah, the Brewers was, we did like a series of redesigns for their Brewers mascot, like the costume guy that would be at games. And I don't know if they ever chose one of ours or if we were just like one of many people that were doing the designs for this guy. And then Bengals was like an open for the scoreboard company. So like at the beginning of the game, they're like, it's the Bengals, and that's like a cartoon tiger, you know. So yeah, those were fun. That's been probably about 15 years ago now. I just need to update my.
Okay. So if you don't mind, we can go on to Stray Dogs now.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So I noticed you're the co-creator, Trish Forstner, who's the artist, correct?
Right.
So is the original idea yours, or did you guys co-create the idea?
I had the idea, and then I had a very clear idea of what I wanted it to look like. And then Trish was the first person that I thought of when I thought of like, who could I find to draw this? Because I draw cartoony. My main job is drawing like My Little Pony comics.
Okay.
And so I could draw a version of this book, but I wanted it to look very specifically like a 90s animated type feel. You know, like I wanted to look like Balto. Is that too loud? Does that mess up?
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to look like Balto or like Oliver and Company. One of these sort of like 80s, 90s animated dog things. I wanted to have that exact feeling. And Trish drew a lot of that style of stuff. I'd seen her draw it like online, and I knew her from My Little Pony because she also worked on that. And so I reached out to her, and she had not done a comic at that point. But I was just like, I sort of pitched her the story, and she was into it immediately. And it's very different from the kind of stuff that she normally would do. Like, she's not a horror person, but she loves dogs, and she loved the project right away. And so I was very lucky that she agreed to come on and do it with me, because I can't think of anybody else that I would have wanted. Like, I can't imagine it looking any other way, you know?
Yeah. When I seen the book, the movie that came to my mind was All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
I had seen, so most of the stuff I'd seen Trish draw was like ponies and some other, like she loves the chipmunks and Care Bears and stuff. So I'd seen her draw like a lot of really cute stuff. But there was one drawing on her website that was, she had drawn her dog as Charlie from All Dogs Go to Heaven. And it was just like the exact right Don Bluth style, you know, and I saw it and I was just like, oh man, I hope she could do this with me.
So on the actual book, was it difficult finding a publisher for the book? Did you, besides Image, did you go to other publishers, or were you just aiming for Image?
We were always hoping that it would be Image. Image is always your first choice when you're doing a creator-owned book, especially in a situation like we had where we didn't need money for it. Like, we financed it all ourselves, as far as like paying the colorist or the paying the layout guy or the designer. Like, we covered all that part. And Image's deal is they will give you an advance if you need money sometimes, but usually their deal is just like, you bring them a comic book, they'll print it and put it out, and they won't take any of your rights or any of your anything. So it's pretty much the best deal. So you, like, if you're making a creator-owned book, you want to go to Image. So we were hoping that was where it would end up, but I had no experience with them prior to this, other than like I'd done some covers for books, for their books, or like, you know, I'd done like short stories and stuff like that, but that doesn't involve me having to talk to the publishers there or the people that actually approve books there. That's just like, my buddy does a book at Image and he says like, hey, do you want to do a cover? And that all happens, you know, just between the creators. So I wasn't sure how to approach them. I mean, they have like on their website, they have, here's how you put together a pitch. And I'd read other people's pitches. And I was really nervous about it, because like I said, that's the place you want it to be at. And also with a book that's as weird as ours is conceptually, having the Image logo on it is sort of like a reassuring, it's a reassuring thing to a customer. They see like, this looks weird, but it's Image, so it's probably okay. You know, like, it's probably at least, you know, not stupid. And so I had I did the whole pitch. It's 5 pages and a cover, and like we had all kinds of stuff, artwork and process stuff, and then a script and a letter that said like, Dear Eric Stevenson, blah blah blah. Here's what you could compare it to. The whole plot, like all the stuff that you're supposed to have for the pitch, and I really labored over it. But then I'm friends with this guy named Kyle Higgins, who does the book Radiant Black at Image right now. And he's done a bunch of stuff at Image and Marvel. And he knew about Stray Dogs and was a big fan of it just while I was making it. While me and Trish were making it. And he said like, well, I know those people. Like, I know Eric Stevenson and the Image people. So would you let me show it to them? And I was like, yeah, I mean, please. Because otherwise I could just email it off and it could go into the, you know, into the great beyond and sort of be lost on somebody's inbox for years or whatever. And it was at San Diego Comic-Con, the last one that happened.
Yes.
And I wasn't going down until like the Friday, and I got a call or a text on Thursday night, and it was Kyle, and he was like, "Hey, dude, are you here right now?" And I was like, "No, I'm not coming down until tomorrow." And he's like, "Oh, well, Image wants to publish your book, so hurry up and get down here." And I was like, "Oh, that was way easier. Like, I did all this preparation." He apparently just showed it to him like on his phone, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll publish that." So it was much easier than what I had prepared for, and I don't think that's an indication of how easy it would be the next time or anything like that. I think this one just sort of is an easy sell.
You have to be at the right place at the right time. So
yeah, exactly.
It worked out for you. So
doesn't hurt to know people, all that stuff.
Oh yeah. So I was wondering if COVID or any of the restrictions has inhibited or made it harder for you to get this book out there.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's worked out in our favor. I was very worried, because we've been working on this for 2 years. And I was very worried. Obviously, I was worried about the whole world and COVID in that way, but also just like, what if we worked for 2 years on this thing and then we put it out and comic stores are just closed and everybody's dying, what a bummer. But COVID has been great for comic stores. Like, everybody I know that has a comic store is like, we're selling more than we ever did before, because people are stuck at home, and people are reading. And so it's sort of been, I mean, it's ridiculous to say it's been the perfect time, but it's been a good time to put a new book out because everybody's on their phone, everybody's at home, everybody's reading, like, it's just sort of like, couldn't have asked for you have a captive audience, right? Like, yes. Everybody's just stuck at home.
For sure. So I have 2 of the books here. This is the book when I go through when I order books, like, on a monthly basis, they're like 2 or 3 months in advance. This is the cover that grabbed my attention. I just went, oh gosh. Even before I read anything about the little storyline, I go, I'm going to buy this book no matter what. I just said Silence of the Lambs, obviously. I said this one and then this cover too.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, these 2 covers, like I said, I didn't even read anything. I go, I'm there. I know this. I just had a feeling it was going to be a great book. And, so far it has been. But tell us about the storyline of the book. How did you come up with the idea?
Well, so the story, for if people are watching that haven't read it yet, and this is slight spoilers, it's a story about, there's a serial killer who takes people's dogs as his trophies after he kills them. And this is a story told from the perspective of those dogs who all live together in a house, and they don't have great memories. And so they just think they live in an idyllic cartoon movie, like, for them, they just wake up in the morning and they live in a house and they're all their friends are there. But what actually has happened is that they've been kidnapped, and so it's a new dog shows up and says, this is what's happened. And then she has to convince them that that's what's going on. They have to figure out what they're going to do. So I came up with it. I have, like, my best ideas come from seeing somebody do something and then going like, oh, I would not have done it that way. I feel like I would have done a different thing. Like, I think everybody has that when they see a movie that's just like, they don't like the way it ended and they go like, oh, it should have ended, Batman and Superman should have beat the crap out of each other and not made friends with each other or whatever. My best ideas come from that, sort of like seeing 2 things that I think would work better together than apart, or like move this thing around here. And I was watching a TV show where there was a killer, and I left the room, and when I came back in the room, the killer had a puppy. And I was like, did he kidnap that puppy from a victim? Like, does he taking dogs as trophies? And my friends were like, no, that's not what happened at all. And I was like, oh, well, it'd be cool if that was what happened, like. And I started thinking about the idea of a murderer that took his victims' dogs as trophies, and like, what would the story of that be? And I kicked it around for a while. The story came to me pretty quickly, but it didn't start happening until I realized that the story is not about like the victim or the killer. If I make the story about the dogs and tell it from their perspective and make it like this, Balto, or like Rover Dangerfield, but with a murderer, then that's a story. Like that's something interesting that you haven't seen before. And so once I got that, the premise sort of figured out, the whole story sort of filled in pretty quickly from there. Just as far as like, oh, I know this happens like in the middle, and I know this happens at the very end, and sort of like all these ideas started coming to me. So I just started jotting stuff down really fast, and from there it took a long time to like arrange the story how it's supposed to be, and like figuring out like what these, like I knew a big thing happens at a certain point, but I wasn't sure exactly what the big thing was. It's just a matter of like really sitting around and thinking about it. And I have a bunch of writer friends that I'll go, grab coffee with, and we'll talk about story stuff. And so it was a lot of figuring it out, because I really wanted it, like I thought it was a good idea, and I wanted it to be the best version of it that it could possibly be.
Sure. How did you pick the personalities of the dogs? I mean, like Sophie and Rusty, and I know Imogene, I believe, hasn't said a word yet, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I read that right.
Yeah. Well, there were some that were sort of like, I wanted it to feel, like I said, I wanted it to feel like one of these movies. So there's some that are just sort of like built in to the premise, like in every one of these movies, there's like a nurturing, like mother dog type, and there's like an alpha dog type who's the cool guy. I like when before we even had names or designs, I would call him like the Billy Joel, like in Oliver Company, Billy Joel plays that one dog that steals the sausages, and he's just so cool. Like he wears sunglasses, and you're just like, oh, this is a cool dog. But then other dogs came from the story, like the hound dog Earl. Like I was talking to a writer friend, and I knew certain things happen in the story. And he was like, well, you need one of the dogs to just wholeheartedly not believe what's happening. And he's like, you should have it be like an old dog. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. And so then immediately I thought like, oh, that's a hound dog, and like I started figuring out like what Earl was from there. Imogene, I always like in a movie when there's like a silent character. It's stupid, but like if you think to like Stephen Wright's character in Half Baked just lays on the couch the whole movie, and then at a certain point he just says something important, Silent Bob, or there's that Simpsons joke about where there's like a fight happening in the yard, and Homer's like, well, the little guy hasn't done anything yet. I can't leave yet because he's just standing there. He's gonna do something.
Yeah, I think Imogene's gonna have a bigger part. That's just my opinion. I'm just waiting for this dog to do something,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then some of them came from their names. Like when I started writing, like figuring out what the story was, I wrote probably like a couple pages of it just in prose to sort of get going. And that was when I first wrote down their names. And so like Gucci, when I wrote the name Gucci, I knew that was going to be like an ugly dog who thinks she's beautiful, and then I could also sort of think back to like who their owners were before, and like how that influenced their personality. Henry and Other Henry, I knew that like I wanted the first Henry to be a dog that presents as like a fancy dog, but he would just be like a regular dog, so he's like a poodle, a fancy poodle. And then Other Henry, I knew I wanted it to sort of be like a wacky, like a comedy dog. I knew I wanted a dog named Killer, just because I thought it was funny that there was a killer and also a dog named Killer.
Yeah.
So yeah, they just sort of like their personalities sometimes came out of their names, and in some cases they came out of like the character that I needed for the plot. Yeah, they came from all kinds of different places. I mean, there's 11 of them, so I had a lot of different places that I could draw from for all those different dogs.
Sure. There was on one page on issue 2, when Sophie was in that room where they were supposed to go into, and they had a side view, they had a picture of her, but then you seen like a tear coming down her face.
Yeah.
I thought that was awesome, by the way. And it just made me care about the character even more. I went, oh, this poor dog, I was like, dang it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's, I said in some other interview recently that it's sort of like we get to skip a step. That if you were doing a book about like 11 kidnapped people that were all held hostage, first of all, like just think of how grim that would be, like that's like a like a torture porn movie or something, just like the idea of 11 people stuck in a house together, but also the work that you would have to do to get people to care about each of those 11 people, to write their story or, you know, their backstory or show them being heroic or whatever. Like, we sort of get to skip a lot of that just by having them be dogs, you know, like people automatically care about dogs. And so while we have like written them and made them into characters, like you sort of get a little bit of a benefit of the doubt as far as like people being invested already. So it worked out.
Going back to Earl really quick, you said
Yeah.
you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but he says, I'm a bloodhound. I would smell it. You know, if he was a killer, if something bad happened, I would know. You think he's just, you know, putting it behind his mind, and so he knows it's there, but he won't admit it?
I mean, I'm not going to say. But it could be a number of things. Like people have said, like, well, maybe he's the first dog, you know, like maybe he wasn't kidnapped, or maybe he's in on it, you know, like any number of things. But I'm not, you know, I would not say what, you know.
Well, I have to try asking.
But one of the things that I had fun with in doing this is sort of like, because their memories aren't strong, it could be that he totally believes it, you know, it could be that he totally is lying, you know, like because of this, each of the dogs is their own untrustworthy narrator, you know, like each one of them could just be wrong about shit. And
Sure.
So having the dogs be wrong, or having them say something that they think is true but isn't true, you know, like it's helpful for a mystery to have all those characters that are trying to figure out what's going on but don't know exactly what's going on.
So going on to issue number 3, I read it once and I was like, oh my God. I read it again right before this. We got together to make sure I've had any questions about it. To me, I don't know if you used to watch The Walking Dead when it first came out. Every week it was so nerve-wracking for me. Like my stomach was in knots, you know, waiting for the next episode. This issue, number 3, was almost like the same thing. I had a feeling something bad was going to happen. And I was like, I don't know, man. So I took my time reading it, but I got nervous. And at the end, I went, dang it. You know, I know something, it had to happen, you know, but I was like, oh my God. And, you know, like I said, it was like a kick in the gut, you know, so to speak. But I really enjoyed it. And like I said, I read it twice. So.
Thank you. Yeah, we were real nervous about it. And we're nervous about, you know, like all the rest of the series, because in the first 2 issues, it's sort of like, and I guess even at this point in 3, it's sort of like, well, it could be that the dogs are wrong about this, you know, and everything's going to be fine, and everyone's going to be okay. But at a certain point, if everyone's not okay, then you risk the chance that readers are just going to go like, that's fucking not for, you know, like that. I showed up for the cute dogs, and if this sort of thing's going to happen, you know, like I'm not here for it. But in keeping with the, like, sort of the animated style, and obviously crossing it with a horror story, you know, like this is the sort of thing that happens in every animated movie, you know, Bambi, you know, like the rescuers, terrifying shit happens in those, you know, like the Land Before Time, like every one of them, Lion King, you sort of go through these sort of big tragic moments where you're just like, oh man, now what are they going to do, you know?
Yeah.
And being that this is a 5-issue story, issue 3 is the point where it's going to start getting, like, everything starts to ratchet up and get crazy. So stuff's about to get crazy.
So can you tell us anything about issues 4 and 5? No spoilers, but I mean, is it, you know, like grab your seats and hang on?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is grab your seats and hang on. The way that the plot of the book worked out, issue 1 is the issue that has your twist, you know, like it's the sort of intro issue. And so it feels the most like an animated dog movie, you know, like it's the Balto issue. Like I know I say Balto a lot, but I really love that movie. But and then issue 2, it starts to be suspenseful, you know, like, and it's sort of like a thriller, like they're digging into it and starting to investigate. It's sort of like the Hitchcocky one. They're going in places they're not supposed to be, and you're in these dark closets and stuff. And And then issue 3 is the one where it turns into like a horror story. Like it's got real horror story beats and the scares, and sort of like everybody's heartbeat should start to get racing. And then issue 4 is where it's crazy. Like issue 4 is crazy, and then issue 5 is, I called it like our Image comic, because I'm 41 years old. So to me, Image comics are like 2-page spreads and action and a million bullets. And there's not a million bullets in our book, but you know, like big bombastic action. And that's what issue 5 is. I just, like, literally before we got on this call, I finished lettering issue 5. And so that's sort of like the big finale, like the big action finale. So I don't think that's a spoiler necessarily, but sort of like next one is crazy. And it's sort of like a ratcheting up of what 3 was. And then 5 is the, you know, the climax, the finale. And issue 4 starts out, you get to see a little more about Earl. Like you get to see Earl as a little puppy.
Oh, okay.
So that's something. That's a little tease, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I've become a big fan of your work, just to let you know. And
thank you.
Hopefully you come up with other books in the future, because I'm going to keep my eye out. I mean, I'm usually, you know, when I was growing up, I would always read like Marvel and DC and superheroes. I've gotten older. I like reading books that are just different, out of the norm, so to speak. So I really appreciate it, just to let you know.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, I'm the same, you know, I started out reading superheroes, and then the older I got, and when I started to create my own stuff, I realized that I didn't necessarily feel like a superhero. Like that's not necessarily the stories that I have in me. And so luckily I've been able to sort of find outlets for my stuff that's not, you know, that's not about people in tights and stuff. Yeah. I just don't have the like whatever the confidence or the testosterone or whatever it is to put myself in the head of somebody that is very strong and can fly or whatever. I'm just like, I don't know what that would be like. I don't know what that would be about. Maybe that's interesting, but I feel like they've also made all of those sort of like post superhero comics already too, you know, where it's just like somebody that's trying to figure out what to do with the superpowers or whatever. That being said, I am working on on like a superhero thing upcoming with a friend of mine. So
with Image or just another publishing company?
Hopefully it's with Image too, but we'll know more later this year. And then I have a Kickstarter coming up at like right at the end of Stray Dog, a book that I wrote and my friend Christian drew called Time Shopper.
Okay.
Which is like a one-shot short graphic novel, like you know, the European format, like the larger hardcovers.
Sure.
So it's one of those, and it's about a guy that gets a job traveling in time, and he's supposed to like fix all of history's greatest disasters and mistakes, you know, like warn the Titanic and kill baby Hitler and stuff.
It's going to be a Kickstarter. I'll keep an eye out.
Yeah, that'll be a Kickstarter. That guy gets distracted. Instead of doing all the stuff he's supposed to do, he just goes shopping in time and buys stuff for cheap.
Well, I think you've answered all my questions. I want to thank you again for being on my channel, Tony.
Yeah, of course.
Anybody who watches this video, go out and buy this book. You will not be disappointed. Trust me, okay? See, he's got some too. We got these books, you know, they're awesome books. So this is must read, and I give it a, you know, 2 thumbs up. And once again, this is Efren from Past Point One Comics. Everybody be safe and take care of yourselves out there.
Yeah, thanks, Efren.
Yeah, thank you, Tony.